She may have only just made it to the job she strived for her entire life, but Liz Truss may be closer to her final day as Prime Minister than her first. After promising low taxes for the highest earners throughout her leadership campaign, her first budget backfired dramatically, leading to the pound falling to its lowest ever rate against the dollar, the sacking of the finance minister who supposedly orchestrated everything, and a U-turn on every major policy announced thus far, including a tax increase rather than a decrease. And it doesn't look like it will get any better for Truss, as polls have put the Conservative Party over 30 points behind the Labour Party. Her net approval ratings at a record low of -61%, and supposed challenges coming from within her own government expected imminently. So where does she go from here? Is there a way to get the public and her party on her side, or is the Conservative Party ready for turning? Would the Conservative Party be shooting itself in the foot by changing Prime Ministers so quickly, or is it the last chance to save it from a wipeout at the next election? Would Labour fare any better, or is power in the UK considered a poisoned chalice? What's next for the United Kingdom?
Okay, let's get to it. What is next for the United Kingdom? As always, we begin with a quick fire round of 30 seconds each and pick up the conversation right after. Phil, Dave, your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts, how long have you got? I don't think I can summarise it all in 30 seconds, that's for sure. But I will certainly give it my best try and say that, look, I think that politics has moved faster in the last few weeks than I ever remember it moving in my lifetime. And as much as I would love to think that the Conservative Party can get back on track sooner rather than later, if for no other reason than for the sake of the country, I would also very much hope that it's the case just to make sure that at the very least they keep Labour out of power, because frankly, I think the country is still reeling from when they were in power all those years ago. So, as far as I'm concerned, a tricky road ahead.
Well, the laughing Jonathan Lees, what's on your mind?
The idea that Labour could be seen as a chaotic or in any way bad option after the absolute chaos, crisis, wall-to-wall turmoil that we've seen, not just in the last sort of few weeks, but over the last 6 years, is completely ridiculous. The Labour Party is ready for power. The Conservatives don't know what they're doing. They're about to move on to the third Prime Minister in the space of 4 months. They are completely exhausted and they need to go.
Well, Jonathan, I will quote from The Wire before we go to Dan Perry. It's not about who is winning, but about who is losing slower. Dan Perry, 30 seconds are on.
The UK is in chaos altogether, not just the Conservative Party, not just any other party. Look, I think the two big questions now are whether Jeremy Hunt's astounding about-face on the Truss economic plan will succeed in calming the markets and stabilizing the economy and shoring up the currency, and whether Truss herself can survive this rather bizarre political moment. In theory, she has almost a year's grace, but in reality, I think she may be one or two missteps away from her own party changing the rules and tossing her out.
Okay, so let's dive in deeper. The Home Secretary announcing her resignation this evening, and while it is not directly related to Truss, it does ring some bells from the minister's resignation that triggered the Boris departure. My question to you, gentlemen, is there anything Liz Truss can do at this point in time, or is there simply no way back? Jonathan Lees.
There's absolutely no way back for Truss. There's no point in Liz Truss anymore. She came into office to do one thing, which was to lower taxes. She's now had to entirely jump that promise, and she's now implementing the policies of her arch rival, Rishi Sunak. In fact, she's even going the other way, because Rishi Sunak wants to reduce tax in a couple of years' time, and Liz Truss has now scrapped that pledge altogether. So there's no point in her being there. She has no policy platform to deliver. She's in office, but not in power, and it doesn't look as though she'll be in office beyond the end of the week, given the permanent crisis which we're seeing at the heart of the government.
Can I just say, I think this is something uniquely and interestingly British, that the troubles that Truss is currently facing and the loss of trust, as you say, and the dissatisfactions in her parliamentary faction might lead to her resigning in a manner so bizarre. I mean, can any of us imagine, a U.S. president or an Israeli prime minister or really any other major leader in another Western country contemplating even resigning, or their party tossing them out, when what that would mean is a fifth leader in less than in about 6 years? I think the reason why they might not do it is that it would make them look ridiculous, and the Conservative Party, I'm afraid, cannot afford to look any more ridiculous.
No, well, to be honest with you, I don't think politics can stand to look any more ridiculous if it tries. And I love the way that we are focusing all attention here just on the Conservative Party, as if somehow the Labour Party is the magic solution to this, which of course they are clearly not. I'm not being funny, but it wasn't that long ago that the Labour Party were absolutely all over the news because of the way that they had let anti-Semitism spread through it like an absolute plague. And I find it absolutely staggering that any British Jew would even contemplate thinking that Labour are vote-worthy to get into power, knowing full well that when that scandal was so recent, that as if by now somehow it's just magically cleared away. Of course it hasn't. A lot of the people who were at the heart of that scandal are still in the Labour Party. So the fact that you actually want to see them into power, Jonathan, it absolutely beggars belief. But anyway, as far as the Conservatives are concerned, of course,
Phil, but I wouldn't expect anything less from you.
I mean,
thank you.
By the way, this issue of this idea of Jews voting based on theoretical Jewish interest or based on who is more anti-Semitic, and I think there's anti-Semitism everywhere, is a little offensive to many of the Jews. No, I mean, it's a little offensive to the Jews, frankly. Maybe they vote as Britons first, and maybe they recall that Britain went through a rather spectacular boom in the first decade of the 21st century, and a series of missteps, to be polite, under the Conservatives, beginning with austerity, going to Brexit, and the calamitous COVID policies, the ridiculousness of Boris Johnson, and the current incapacity of the Conservative Party. Labour is no panacea, but if you compare the two, you compare the 2010s to the 2000s, I don't think it necessarily puts Conservatives in a better light, frankly.
No, listen, don't get me wrong. As far as I'm concerned, I have absolutely no issue whatsoever with saying that Labour are potentially better behaved than Conservatives. As far as I'm concerned, the Conservative Party is absolutely imploding at the moment, and I want nothing more than for them to get back on track. But not because I think that they deserve to be ousted as a party. They just need to get back on track and stick to Conservative policies, not this wishy-washy liberal nonsense that they seem to be inflicting on us all the time.
Blame David Cameron.
I do.
Well, Jonathan, Lisa, I can see that you're amused, but you're probably, yeah.
You can't take it seriously. I mean, to describe Liz Truss being liberal wishy-washy, I mean, words no longer have any meaning. I mean, is this English we're talking? And let's just be serious for a moment. The Conservative Party.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do apologise if I wasn't giving the impression I was being quite serious. I am, I assure you.
No, I'm worried that what worries me most that you were being serious, Phil. But let's leave that to one side. The Conservative Party is an absolute
How about we have a sensible discussion rather than picking apart?
Everyone can agree that the Conservative Party is an absolute joke and it doesn't deserve to be taken seriously. I think we can probably all agree with that at the moment. And that's partly because of personnel, partly because of policy. They have no public mandate to implement a complete new raft of policies. Liz Truss had no mandate to start trickle-down economics and tax cutting, and she certainly has no mandate now to start increasing taxes and to implement a new round of austerity, which completely crippled Britain in the first years of the 2010s. Nobody voted for that. So really what we're seeing now is the Conservative Party declining to remove her for the time being because it knows it would be completely absurd to have 3 prime ministers in the space of 4 months and not then to have a general election. And that is the point. Not only is there no candidate who can unify the Conservative Party, still less the country, but at that point, there would be an absolute democratic imperative to have a general election, and they don't want to have that because they know they would face a wipeout worse than in 1997 when Tony Blair came to power.
What do you make of the Daily Mail suggestion of a ministerial squad to take over altogether, meaning 4 ministers heading the government at the same time, Jeremy Hunt, Ben Wallace, Rishi Sunak, and Penny Mordaunt, all taking over? Is it ludicrous or tangible?
I think it's a brilliant idea. Something has to happen.
Ludicrous.
Well, I think that we can all agree that politics in Britain and any country that claims to be a democracy is not a game of pass the parcel. It's not a game of fantasy football where a party that wins an election has carte blanche to do exactly what it wants for 5 years, exactly when it wants and how it wants and with who it wants. It doesn't work like that. The British people have not voted, certainly for Liz Truss, and they're not going to vote for whoever succeeds her. And so they have to be asked if they still consent. Because if the government doesn't rule with consent, it's not a democracy.
So, Jonathan, with that theory in mind, then, were you quite anti the idea then when Gordon Brown came into power? So after he took over from Tony Blair, did you want to see a general election then?
Phil, as you know perfectly well, there is a
No, did you? I'm just asking.
Well, if you'll actually let me finish, I'll answer your question. There is a history in British politics. There is a history in British politics of leaders succeeding other leaders in the middle of a parliamentary term. I didn't call for a general election when Liz Truss came to office, if you listen to what I actually say. I'm saying that there is no mandate for her to completely change the policies that brought the Conservatives to power in 2019. And I'm also saying that there is a limit to what British democracy can take. No Prime Minister since 1905, no parliament, no party has ditched 2 prime ministers without having a general election. And that is simply the point here. You cannot just pass the parcel, the Conservative Party, to make whoever it wants prime minister and not consult the British people. It's a basic point.
Dan Perry?
I'm afraid that's incorrect. That is exactly how it works.
It is incorrect. You keep saying that you can't do this and that is not how it works, but the fact is that you can do it, and that is how it works. I might agree with you that it appears illegitimate and absurd, but in fact the rules do allow it. Just like the rules in Israel allow a prime minister to run for re-election while being on trial for bribery. I mean, certain rules may seem weird to us, but they are the rules. And in Britain, the Conservative Party is absolutely allowed to do precisely what it's doing. They can change 3 more prime ministers until 2024. Now, I do agree that in Britain there is the quaint and very special tradition of doing the right thing and not being unsporting, and we'll see how that plays out. And I don't rule out that indeed they will agree to a general election just because there's pressure for it. But I have to point out, in Israel, the Likud would never do that. In America, not that you can change the election dates, but even if you could, the Republicans and the Democrats would never do any such thing. Britain, for the moment, a lot has changed, but Britain for the moment is still oddly traditionalist and quaint in its political behavior, and it's sort of a joy to behold. As is your guy's rancor, which reminds me of the rancor in Israel, and it's sort of a relief to see another country is that way.
Well, Dan Perry, Phil Dave, and Jonathan Lees, I cannot wait for this next break to be over because I really want to hear more of you. So we're taking a very short break now and back with much more as we continue this summit shortly. Do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, Dan Perry, Phil Dave, and Jonathan Lees. Thank you all for staying with us. And we're also staying on topic. So Trussonomics, obviously a no, but what is a yes? Let's take a listen to the Labour leader.
And there's still one person clinging on, the Prime Minister. No doubt we'll hear plenty of laughable excuses in the coming days. After 12 years of stagnation, that's all her party has left. But even they know she can't fix the mess that she's created. And deep down, her MPs know something else. They no longer have a mandate from the British people. Whatever they say now, whatever they do, it boils down to one argument for them. It's party first, country second, and that's unforgivable. The change this country needs is a Labour government.
Okay, so let's get to it. Simply put, who is winning from this crisis? Another 30-second round each, and then our conversation. Jonathan.
Well, look, I'm a Labour supporter. I want the Labour Party to win, but I take no pleasure from what's happening because I also love my country. I don't want there to be a total economic chaos. I don't want there to be total political chaos all the time. I long for the days when we have stability. But so the British people are certainly not winning. But if there is one person that's going to be winning, it's obviously the Labour Party. A year ago, we could barely envisage a time that the Labour Party could win a minority. Now we're looking at the Labour Party taking almost every seat. This is a complete catastrophe, not only for the Conservative Party, but for British politics, which needs a plurality.
Dan Perry, are you two refusing to gloat?
Labour Party is clearly the winner here. I mean, they're ahead by 30 points or more in the polls, pretty much unheard of. And the real question, I think, is who's the bigger loser, the Conservative Party or the British people who've been battered by austerity, by Brexit, by COVID, and now by instability and rapid and depressing succession.
Phil Dave?
Well, first and foremost, I find it slightly staggering that anyone can listen to Sir Keir Starmer speaking and then take some sort of inspiration from him, but let's not dwell on that too much. But I would also suggest as well that I find it mildly disconcerting, the fact that the idea of Labour winning is actually because the Tories are imploding. So they're not winning. They've just not really offered anything. They're just winning by default.
Okay, so let's try to theorize here. What would a Labour government look like? A coalition of chaos, as David Cameron famously said, or stability at last? Jonathan?
I think the coalition of chaos line has come back to bite the Conservatives when you're looking at what's happened in the last 6 years. And sort of Ed Miliband, he famously, David Cameron said there'd be chaos with Ed Miliband, who was a Labour leader at the time. He tweeted a clown emoji above that tweet the other day. He should have waited till today when the chaos deepened even further. But really, the Labour Party has completely changed in the last few years. They are straining every sinew to be moderate and centrist, much less radical than the British people would like, actually. The British people want mass nationalisation. They support striking workers. The Labour Party is to the right of them, if anything. And the Labour Party is terrified of upsetting the right-wing media. So what I hope for now is that now they're so far ahead in the polls, they really don't have anything to lose. They can afford to be a lot more radical. It doesn't mean unstable. It means that they can actually deliver a new agenda for Britain, which is begging for change.
I would also
seriously, are you actually telling me that you think British people support striking workers? But I know most people absolutely do not. They are grinding this country to a halt. And you think most people support that?
Yes, actually.
Honestly, I mean, okay, right, let me put it this way to you, okay? I may be many things to stand by Conservatives given the state of them at the moment, but I am not delusional, sir. That is...
I have to say that it has to be noted that the 12, 13 years of Labour Party rule, other than the dust-up over the Iraq War, were not typified by a great degree of instability and chaos. I mean, compare that to all that we've seen since 2010. I have to say, I don't understand the notion that Labour attaches to chaos. But I would like to throw another spanner in the works here and see what happens in this August forum. I mean, there's something in the background here. There is an issue that dare not speak its name, and that issue is Brexit. I am pretty sure that if Labour comes back to power, that will give a lot of succor to the people who are going to say, I told you so, about Brexit causing a decline in the economy, general chaos, and having been based on a campaign that was heavily mendacious. So Labour's not going to say anything to rock the boat right now, certainly not before the campaign. But if they come to power with a supermajority, and the British electoral system inflates majorities into supermajorities, I would be very surprised if the notion of holding a second referendum or reversing this or doing a new and a less dramatic breakup deal with the European Union comes back. And I would note, before we trash this notion too much, that the young people would support this. And the young
Okay,
people.
well, first and foremost, might I suggest I don't know anyone who was in favour of Britain's quite right departure from the European Union, that anyone who said that it was going to boost the economy straight away. I think most of us with a level head knew that there would be a short amount of pain for long-term gain. So let's clarify that straight away.
That's exactly what they said during the referendum campaign, isn't it? What absolute nonsense.
I don't care what they said during the referendum campaign. As far as I'm concerned, I think most
hundreds of millions to the NHS. I mean, it was going to help. It was going to help the NHS. How's the NHS doing now when it takes you 10 hours to get an ambulance? I mean, there were some serious lies in that campaign. Let's be serious.
Quite understandably disintegrating under the pressure of people misusing it, and also whatever anyone thinks is the case, I wholeheartedly believe it's because people unfortunately abuse the NHS rather than the fact that it's underfunded. How much money are you going to throw at something?
I would have to throw a question to my friend from Labour here.
I'm so immeasurably proud of this country, but I sometimes hate the people who live
the
here.
NHS, which your party has run into the ground.
Jonathan, I do have one concern, and that is it not true that Labour has not actually rid itself of the Corbynite wing? At the end of the day, they got rid of Corbyn and they tried to do course correction.
No, that doesn't matter. That's fine. That doesn't matter. Let's bring them into power.
I'm asking, is it unreasonable to fear excessive socialism?
Completely purged the left. They're complete, and much more than they should have done. By the way, look, one thing that I would say about Brexit is that even if Labour wins a massive majority, which at the moment they look like they're going to, they're not going to reopen the Brexit question because it's the one thing that could derail their agenda. They don't want to reopen this trauma which caused them so much difficulty in the last few years, but they have stated that they will have incremental steps to improve the relationship with the European Union, which I think everyone can welcome. But I think it's possible that when we do have a big Labour majority and maybe going into the election after that, there will be a renewed appetite to open up our relationship with the EU. But really, I don't see that happening for the next 10 years.
Okay, so, can I just ask, Jonathan, in all seriousness, did you by any chance watch Prime Minister's questions today?
Yes, I did.
Okay. When your leader stood there poking fun at the Prime Minister, do you really think that's the kind of person you want to be the Prime Minister of this country? Someone who just, frankly, I assume not, because you don't like Boris Johnson doing it too much, but someone who clowns about making jokes rather than actually offer a viable alternative and a serious opposition to the country. Yes. You think that's the kind of person you want in power?
Yes, Bill. Famously, it's unheard of for politicians to crack jokes in the Commons. It's never happened before. No one ever did it.
No, but it's also heard of. But it's also heard of that the leader of the opposition usually comes up with credible alternatives. And I don't think I could name one alternative that Sir Keir Starmer has come up with. What's he going to do for the economy?
Look. I'm not a Labour spokesman, and I've argued repeatedly that
but you are a Labour supporter, and they're the people you're calling on to come to power.
Bill, do you want me to answer or not? At the moment,
I'd love you to, but you seem to dodge the question.
Anything will be better than the Conservative Party. The Labour Party has stated that they want to have a windfall tax, for example, on energy companies. They want to sort of give additional help to people. They want to have a much greener agenda, a new Great British Energy company which is going to sort of invest in renewables, all kinds of things. It doesn't mean they won't. I think to be more radical.
And how are they going to pay for that, Jonathan?
No, gentlemen, I really do hope Britain gets its act together for the sake of Britons, but for our sake, I hope we will get you on very soon.